Good evening and welcome to the January 6th Newark Unified School District Board of Education meeting. Before I call this meeting to order, I'd like to welcome everyone back from a well-deserved winter break. I hope you all had the opportunity to spend quality time with your family, friends, and loved ones over the holidays. I'm excited to be here tonight and to preside over this meeting in my new role as president. I want to acknowledge from the start that I will occasionally make mistakes, will learn from them, and will hopefully, in the end, conquer the parliamentary protocols expected of me. I also wanted to remind my fellow board members, superintendent, executive cabinet, and members of the public that this is the meeting of the board to conduct board business held in public. Since it is a new year and a new beginning of sorts, I want to suggest that we, fellow board members, myself included, along with the superintendent and executive cabinet, on a regular basis, review and understand the protocols and procedures that are laid out in our governance handbook, board policy, and bylaws to ensure orderly conduct of our board meetings. With that said, I call this meeting to order at 5:02 p.m. Okay, so meeting practices and information. So we are conducting in-person meetings and we'll follow the state and Alameda County safety guidelines for public meetings. For additional COVID information, please go to www.newarkunified.org/COVID-19 or https://www.acoe.org/guidance. For public comments, and for those that are observing the meeting, you can also observe the meeting on the NUSD YouTube channel, live transmission on Comcast Channel 26, or in person at the NUSD boardroom. Spanish translation will be available via Zoom. For public comments, the public will have the opportunity to address the Board of Education regarding non-agendized matters and agendized items with a live audio-only comment via Zoom with advance notice requested by email at publiccomment@newarkunified.org. A written comment by submitting a speaking card via email at publiccomment@unified.org, or with live in-person comments by submitting a speaker card with the executive assistant. Thank you. Roll call, please.
Member Zhang?
Here.
Member Hill?
Here.
Vice President Grindal?
Here.
President Nguyen?
Here.
And Member Member Marcus absent.
Thank you. On to the next item, approval. Sorry.
Oh, no, we'll do it later.
Yeah, on to the next item, approval of the agenda. May I have a motion to approve?
I move to approve. I'll second.
Member Zhang motioned and Member Grindel second. How do you vote, Member Zhang?
Yes.
Member Hill?
Yes.
Member Grindel?
Yes.
And myself, yes. 4 ayes and 1 absent. Item number 3, study session. So on the study session, we'll be presiding over board policy of purchasing and contracts. So we'll move over to sit up front and start the study session.
go ahead and get started?
Yeah.
So good evening, board members and staff and families and students at home. So welcome to our first board meeting of 2022, very exciting. So we are starting off with a study session with regard to contract procedures and protocols. I know it's something that has been brought up here at the board, and so we thought it'd be a good opportunity to start the year by talking a little bit about these protocols and for both purchasing and contracts, just so that that we can hopefully provide some clarity about the processes that that districts in general and our district in particular go through with in terms of budget and finance. And then we do have some sort of guiding questions at the end that we'd love your input on and your thoughts about.
Oh, sure.
So I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Delacruz, who's going to lead a brief presentation, and then at that point afterwards we can engage the board in a conversation with some discussion prompts.
Thank you, Dr. Triplett. So we thought we would review the board policies and the ARs that are related to purchasing and contracts, and in particular as they relate to the board agenda items and how our agenda items are in compliance with these board policies and ARs, and hopefully answer any clarifying questions or address any concerns with our current practice, and also review a PO report as an optional report item for board to consider and have a discussion. Is that okay with everyone? Mm-hmm. So the first policy related to expenditures and purchases is the BP 3300. This is the policy that provides the expending authority to the superintendent or designee, which basically authorizes the superintendent or designee the authority to purchase supplies, materials, equipment, and services up to the current bid limit, which as of January 1st is $99,100. This bid limit is set by the state and comes from the Superintendent of Public Instruction. The board policy.
Ms. Delacruz,
Oh, sorry.
Could you repeat that one more time? So the dollar amount, sorry.
The dollar amount is $99,100. That's the current bid limit as of January 1st. And each year it changes and it's set by the state, and it comes from the Superintendent of Public Instruction.
Okay, so if you have something that is going to be larger than 99,000, what's the process for that, or are you going to get it out there?
That's what
Yeah, it has to go out to bid.
Okay, all right. So anything under 99,000 does not have to go out to bid?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, and that's for supplies, materials, and equipment. Without getting into too much detail, because we weren't going to go into too much detail about the bid limit, there's also a bid limit for construction projects, which is $200,000. But for this study session, we want to cover the reports that are provided and presented to the board on a regular basis, whether it's monthly or quarterly. And as a requirement of this board policy, it states that the board shall review all transactions entered into by the superintendent or designee on behalf of the board every 60 days. So in our case, the board reviews the transactions through the warrant report, which is presented to the board on a monthly basis. So we actually do it more often than what is required. And then also as part of this policy, it states that all purchases shall be made by formal contract or purchase order or shall be accompanied by a receipt. And it also talks a little bit about blanket POs, which basically allows us to process what's known as blanket or open POs for small purchases. For example, if we order through an office supply place on a regular basis, rather than do, $50 POs, $40 POs, 100 POs to the same vendor, then this policy allows us to do the blankets POs.
And the, where you say that all purchases have to be made by formal contract or purchase order or shall be accompanied by a receipt. So I'm imagining that there's probably dollar limits that determine whether, when a contract gets, invoked, or whether it's a simple purchase order or whether it's a simple receipt.
Yeah, so all of the purchases, as stated in the previous slide, are guided by the bid limit. So superintendent or designee, we're authorized to sign purchases up to the bid limit. So anything beyond that will go out to bid and then go out and be presented to the board.
I think I understand the question. Is there a threshold for within that bid limit, whether or not a contract or a PO or a receipt simply is required? Or is that just, that's not in our regulations? It's one of the others. It doesn't necessarily, if it's 99, that doesn't mean it has to be a contract necessarily.
That's right. It could either be a contract or a PO.
Right, but the part that I'm really zeroing in on is the receipt part, right? Because normally, right, so receipt is for some type of like kind of petty cash reimbursement. But you wouldn't go out and buy like a $20,000 vehicle and then just bring in a receipt and say, okay, I purchased this, right? So that's going to go through a formal process of requisitioning and potentially a purchase order, correct?
Correct. So all the purchase transactions includes, for example, orders for materials and supplies, contracted services, field trips, assemblies, and reimbursements. Reimbursements for us are the exception and not the normal process because we stress the process of having everything go through a PO, a purchase order. So if a vendor accepts our purchase order, then we expect that order to go through a purchase order. For example, even if, let's say you were at Target and, Target accepts our POs, you can't just buy, $1,000 worth of items and then expect to be reimbursed. Everything has to be pre-approved. And the only time that we would approve something like that is if the vendor just will not take our purchase order. But our purchase order process is our standard process for all of our expenditures.
Okay.
And all our purchase requisitions, they go through our online escape system, which includes an online approval process. And this board policy 3310 states that, the superintendent or designee shall maintain effective purchasing procedures. So basically, the district is required to maintain purchasing procedures, which we do, and the business office processes all POs. Everything goes through the business office. And then there's some references here with the Ed Code on delegation of powers to agents, delegation of authority to purchase supplies and equipment. So that's all part of the board policy.
Mr. Oakes, before we go into this, I just wanted to make sure that the definition here of receipt, is that strictly for reimbursement, or is that receipt is also sort of defined as like an invoice, for example?
In this case, receipt is more for reimbursement. It's just a form of a backup so that, in order for us to approve a purchase that is backed up by a receipt in the form of a reimbursement, then it's not, we're not talking about an invoice, it's a receipt.
So if there's an invoice, there's a PO that goes behind it. The receipt is somebody in an emergency had to go buy some pencils.
Yes.
And whatever, the vendor that they were going to, the Safeway, didn't want to take our PO, or the time was not possible. It's relatively small, but even with an invoice would have a PO, would go through a PO process.
That's right.
And that's kind of standard accounting practice, right? And so
Right.
that's called a two-way match.
Right.
And so you're always going to have a purchase order,
Yes.
right? That shows that there's been a request that's been put in. It's gone through the appropriate approval steps. It then turns into a purchase order, and then purchasing happens. And then when an invoice comes in, you're going to match and say, okay, I'm having somebody say that I want to be paid. Do I have an authorized PO? Right, and that's one of your internal controls, right?
Exactly.
To check, and that you're not going to pay before you have a match.
Exactly.
Okay.
So if we receive an invoice does not reference a PO number, that's a red flag, right? So we're gonna go back and investigate, is there a PO for this? Because sometimes, there is a PO, but maybe the vendor forgets to reference it. Or is there not a PO, and why is that? So then we go through and go to whoever ordered it, receive the goods, and
And do you guys also keep a copy of the quotes that they
Yes.
get in order to create the purchase order?
yes, our system actually has a way of attaching those documents, so everything is online. We're able to attach the documents in the escape system.
Thank you for that clarification. And I think one of the reasons I want to just make sure it's clear is because I think sometimes the public gets a little confused that everything has to have a contract, and that's actually not the case. That sometimes a purchase order with the quote is sufficient. Is
Yes,
that correct?
that's correct. Yes, and,
In districts.
Right.
Right.
terms of how-
And when
And
you
the
say sometimes there's no monetary issue there.
Right.
But it's going to be more physical goods. You're going to want a contract if you're buying services more likely.
exactly.
Right.
Yeah, and the PO is a form of a contract in a way that it obligates the district for
Yes.
that order. And then if you have a service contract, we confirm it and back it up with a purchase order.
Right, thank you for the budgeting 101, I appreciate it. There is a lot of confusion. If, with a contract, we could, for example, attach requirements that people meet the COVID restrictions.
Yes.
That has been a question in the past.
Yes,
Whereas a PO, it'd be very difficult to do that.
right.
Possible
Yes.
with sort of a side letter, but difficult. Right. Thank you.
Yes, but overall, there's a PO attached to every purchase transaction, whether it's an order for materials and supplies, or whether it's a contract for an independent contractor, they will all have a PO associated with it.
Thank you.
So every warrant that we see is going to match to a PO.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. So this is just a brief summary, rundown of the basic process of a purchasing order. So, the first step usually is, you determine what you need to purchase, and then you identify your budget source, right? And then from there, the requisition is entered into escape. And at this point, it's not a purchase order yet, because it still needs to go through the approval process. So the purchase requisition goes through an approval process, and the approvers, this is all done online through our escape system. It could be principals, directors, assistant superintendent, myself, or the superintendent. And
And that depends on the size?
depending on who's managing that budget and the size. So both. So all of our principals are assigned to certain budget codes, and they're the only ones that can approve their budget items. And usually, Ms. Pierce will approve after that. So the principals will approve it, and then Ms. Pierce will review it, and then it'll go through her approval process. And once all of the approvers have gone through it and approved it, then a PO is generated. If there's any issues in between, let's say, you know, the budget code is incorrect and there's a way to send it back to the requisitioner. So then, once it's approved, then a PO is generated and issued. So that PO is processed and printed or emailed by the business office, and it's sent to the vendor. They will fulfill the order or provide the services, so the district receives the goods or the services, and then we receive the invoice. Our normal process is that goods are delivered to our warehouse, and so our warehouse will verify the order. They'll check in the order, and they'll send the packing slip to accounts payable, and then they deliver to the sites.
Services might be different.
Yes, services,
In fact,
yes, this is
services
for
are gonna
goods.
be the larger ticket items generally, right? We spend a lot more on special ed than we do on paper.
Yeah, like transportation is a big one, that will have a PO, but the services will be, of course, that wouldn't go through the warehouse, but we verify that the services have been received before the invoices are
And so
paid.
you could have a PO for 100,000 and receive invoices for $10,000 a month.
Yes.
Conceivably. So it's not necessarily, you're gonna, as long as it stays under that PO, you can process the payment.
Yes, which is where you would see that in the warrant report, all the payments that have been processed against a certain purchase order.
Thank you.
So I have a question.
Mhm.
In regards to, do you allow district employees to create their own emergency purchase orders?
There's only authorized users to enter POs.
Okay.
Not all employees.
Well,
There's
certain.
usually it's the office managers, admin assistants. They're the ones that will enter their POs.
But you don't allow staff, like the principals, if they needed to purchase something, you know, in an emergency cases, like allow them to generate a random PO number to a vendor. Like, we're allowed to do that at the city, but and then after the fact, we have to, you know.
Clean it up.
Clean it up, yeah.
Yeah, so I think what you're referring to is what sometimes districts will have this instant PO process.
Correct.
And they're assigned a limited number of purchase order numbers, pre-assigned.
Yeah.
And there's a dollar limit, so anything not to exceed $100 per se. And then they would have to submit all of the backup and all of the paperwork related to any instant POs that they issue. But we don't have that.
Okay.
Everything goes through the district.
Great.
Yeah, so no, the schools do not have.
No, that's good because today.
Any instant or emergency type POs assigned, pre-assigned per se to the
Yeah.
schools.
No, that's really good because one of our directors issued an emergency PO. I mean, it's for a large amount, but it was approved by council already. It's just that they needed to get that PO number so they can start processing. But today we had a similar situation where I found, 2 invoices that were charged to that PO. And closely to $25,000 it's supposed to be charged to a different project, but we found that error today, on a major project that I'm working on at work. And so I can see why those kinds of issues do happen and come up.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that we don't have that here.
You're probably going to cover it, but also what are emergency procedures? Or can this escape process work fast enough, even for emergencies, where the superintendent determines we need to be able to distribute 1,000 test kits, for example. Hopefully they're free, but for us, nothing's free.
Yeah.
But, so are you gonna go over sort of what the emergency procedures are, or does everything run through this process?
Everything runs through this process, but there is a way that we can expedite the PO.
But it's
Yeah,
still,
because you can't expedite the oversight, right? And so you know, that's the, you know, that's all a part of the internal control. So, I mean, you can expedite the process, but you
Yes.
cannot bypass the process.
right, understood,
Yes.
thank you.
So we do have a way to expedite the process, and we have received those types of calls where, you know, we need a PO today, can you help us? And then we'll get it going and get the PO out the same day, but it's all goes through the same process.
That's good.
And then quick question for you, Ms. Dela Cruz. So in the first step, determine purchasing need, check budget. I would imagine that a lot of times people who are requisitioners may not even know what the budget is. And so is there somebody further along in the chain that is evaluating that?
Yes, so this system will not allow the PO to be generated or go past any approval without the budget being in place. So if they're not sure what the code is or if there's budget, usually they'll contact our director to verify or to assist with, you know, the budget codes or the budget amounts. That
Okay.
we do that a lot, so we provide that
'Cause the-
assistance.
Right, because the question I have is, I mean, obviously, when you're creating your requisition, you have to put in an account code.
Yes.
And you say, okay, this is the bucket of money that I'm trying to use to satisfy this need. So that's going to start at the beginning, and if they don't know, they're going to ask somebody.
Yes.
But just because they know that code, they don't know the budget, right? And
Right.
so they could conceivably, if they don't know that, maybe overspend. So oftentimes you'll have somebody further down
Yeah.
that says, okay, yeah, there's this big transaction, but it's gonna cause a major budget variance, and so maybe we're gonna, you know, revisit this or possibly deny it. So at what point is there some additional oversight that looks at that?
That's at that second step. So when they're entering the purchase rec and they're entering a budget code and they try to approve it to the next step and there's no budget, it won't go through.
Or there's not enough dollars.
If there's not enough dollars, if the
Right.
budget is not in the code.
But
that-
let me give you an example. Let's say that in a particular budget code for the year, you have $100,000. And when that budget was put together, there was an anticipation that there were 10 different items that would roll up to $100,000, okay? But then somebody who's at a lower level that isn't familiar with the budget, they put in one purchase request or requisition for $99,000. And so, and if nothing's been spent, okay, theoretically, the system's not gonna stop it. But you've consumed all of that budget, and those other 9 items are now, you know, if they come in, you're gonna go over budget.
Yeah.
And so is there some oversights further along to say, okay, we're gonna watch this?
Yes, that would be at that third step where you approve the purchase rec. So the program manager will check that requisition, will look at the budget, and be able to either approve it or reject it at that point. If they're reviewing a PO, for example, like you said, you know, they know they have $100,000 in the budget, and then they're seeing a $90,000 PO, but that the plan is to spend other items under that budget code. At that point, then that program manager can reject the requisition.
And is the program manager the owner of that budget item?
Yes.
Okay. Okay?
Yeah, no, I was gonna ask a similar question, because the budget, I wanted to see sort of how this all fits under the budget, because the budget is really, in my mind, the key fiscal direction from the board. And this is more procedurally how it's done and how it's checked. But the budget is where we're saying, with staff's input, of course, what money should be spent where. And so that there needs to be a tie-in to that budget the whole time. And as Member Hill was indicating, you could have someone who knows the code for something that's, of Chromebooks and instead puts in a requisition for, 17 pallets of paper and somebody who's not vested in interest in getting that paper needs to be able to check that against the budget, whether that's really what was intended for.
Yes, so every program manager is responsible for their budget. And that's where the approval process comes in. And they're all online.
Right, but not just the number in the budget, but also what the purpose is of the budget.
Yes. Yes.
And are there more than one person that are issuing purchase orders?
Issuing, actually generating, no.
Correct.
It's only the business office.
Okay, so a requisition in that purple box gets approved, okay, and however many people within that department approve it. And then it goes to the business office and says, okay, we now have everybody approving. We want you to go and source this. And so there's one or more people in the business office that are going to do that, but nobody else, no other entity outside is issuing purchase
No,
orders.
nobody else. Everything goes, only the business office can generate a PO.
Okay, all right. And then when something gets received in, physically it's pretty easy, as Member Grindell is indicating, if something shows up at the warehouse and, you gotta get it somewhere usually. And so when that shows up, somebody is gonna notify the business office and then they're gonna notify the person, the requisitioner, to say your
Yes.
stuff is here.
Yes.
And then they'll be ready to then, once the invoice comes in, sign off on that.
Yes.
But then if it's a service, they may not be aware of whether the service got delivered or not.
Yes.
And so I'm imagining there will be a report that somebody in the business office runs that says, okay, I've got my aging and it looks like, hey, I've got this outstanding open PO. Has it been received yet?
Yes.
Right? And so then you'll contact the person and say, was this service delivered? And if they say yes, then you'll check the box and then you can pay against it.
Yes, we do
Okay.
that, yes.
Okay.
So we review open PO reports and research anything that's old that hasn't been received or hasn't been paid, whether it's goods or services. And if there's an invoice that shows up for a service, we verify that that service has been provided before we pay.
Okay.
And that's not just whether it's provided in a proper way.
And delivered,
Whether the
yeah,
quality
and the
is there as well,
deliverables
right?
have
Yeah, they have to
been-
accept it. So
Yes.
whoever the requisitioner is has to accept it.
They have to accept it, exactly. And, that could be us getting the invoices signed by the program manager. We do that, yes. We don't pay anything without any proper backup or verification. And plus, our system is connected to the county. We're not an independent district, which means we have oversight by the county. So everything goes through the county. All of the checks that we process for payment, they go through our escape system. It goes to the county, and then the county will review it and approve it and print and issue the checks, and then the checks are delivered back to the district, and then the district will process and mail them out to the vendors.
But that check is only up once you've asked them to issue a check. They're not interfering in this process.
No. And then even with the warrant, the check run, before it's actually moved on to the county, our director of fiscal services will also review it. So there's a step before it even goes to the county. So our accounts payable may enter it, process, and then we also have our director who will review that batch before it actually moves on to the county. And then the county will further review it before they actually print and issue the checks. So we have a lot of checks and balances in every step.
Well, but I would
And
just,
so,
I would just imagine, Ms. Dela Cruz, that it would be hard for the county to sort of evaluate whether any of this is legitimate. I mean, because what are they checking, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the only thing that they could say is, I mean, they might look at some weird exception and say, you've got to check for $1 million here. But other than that, I mean, is there any other thing that they're doing?
Well, yeah, I'm not sure what
They're
kinds
doing?
of review process they have, but
Okay.
it does have that extra step of
Okay.
oversight.
Okay,
And then all the checks that are issued, that's what's reflected on the warrant report. That's what you see every month.
but have you ever seen a situation where the county has actually stopped, held up a check, a check being processed?
Not that I can recall.
Okay, okay.
So, I just wanted to also mention, because you said, you mentioned something about you can't just go out and get reimbursed. That's specifically true for equipment, any equipment over $500, because everything has to be inventory, which is more reason why we have a PO process. We don't allow any pickups or reimbursements for equipment over $500 because it all has to be inventory. So when the equipment is received in the warehouse, then we tag it and put it in our inventory system. So moving on to
And-
contracts, oh, sorry.
Sorry, just one last question. Because when you say inventory, so is it really that you're just like giving it an asset tag? Or is it actually like going into inventory and then my stuff is getting issued in and out of a warehouse?
Inventory, meaning fixed assets inventory.
Okay, so it's got, all right, so it's basically an asset tag.
Yes.
Okay, all right,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. Okay, so for contracts, Board Policy 3312, this is the policy that designates the superintendent or designee, which is me, to authorize and approve contracts for professional services in the amount not to exceed 1/2 of the current bid limit. So the current bid limit is $99,100, so therefore the authorization is up to $49,550. So this policy gives authority for the superintendent or I to sign contracts under $49,000.
Now, if you said if it's a capital project, the bid limit would be 200,000. So if it's a capital project, that also is 50%, or is that 49 still the?
It's still 49 because
So-
there's a couple of bid limits. This bid limit is for the purchase of equipment, materials, or supplies. And then there's another bid limit for public construction, which is the 200,000. So in this particular case, the limit is based on the purchase of equipment, materials, and supplies, which is the 99.
Right.
So our
If it was
threshold-
architecture for a capital project, it would still have the 49. It wouldn't have the $100,000 as half the $200,000 bid limit.
Correct. Yes, that's right. Yeah,
Thank you.
it's 49, period.
And
And
then,
then,
and so this is related to bids, right?
not bids, this is related to contracts for professional services. So it could be an architect service,
Okay.
it could be a mental health contractor, those types of professional services. So the way
No,
that.
yeah, I'm sorry, I'm not following up on that question.
Oh.
So, because what you're saying in that yellow is the exception, right? So you're saying that contracts for professional services, so you're saying that this half only applies to professional services?
Correct.
Okay, so then if it's not that, if you're gonna buy $100,000 or $99,000 in computers, so then your signing authority is 99,000?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And then at what point, so this says bid, right? But it doesn't say anything about like authorization. And so what I mean by that is that, what are the essentially the signing limits from an authorization standpoint, where at some point the board says, no, any contract above X amount needs to be approved by the board.
This is where you would have it. This particular board policy is based on half the current bid limit, which is something, I want to say, not unique, but that this board and this school district adopted. Because this is not a standard policy for all school districts. And you can see that in the AR, because the AR further identifies which items or which contracts the board still has authority to approve.
So just to understand, the standard, you said it's unusual, the standard would be for the whole bid limit to be something that staff could contract.
Yes,
That there's been a limitation that there's only half the bid limit you can contract directly.
yes,
But still, in every case, the contract needs to be ratified.
yes, yeah. So in that first policy with purchasing, that provides authority up to 99,000, for materials and goods and supplies. But for contracts for professional services, this BP 3312 only allows the 49,000, half the bid limit. So there's a limitation on contracts. There's the limit on other items is based on the bid limit.
Right, but I just want to be clear for the public
Yeah.
that this is a more extreme
More
look
strict.
at it, more
Yes,
strict.
more
that's the word.
restrictive.
Than many districts,
Yes.
most districts, many districts.
So, can we go back to that earlier slide?
Oh,
Okay, so, because this is just sort of funky from my experience. Because there's a difference between authorizing something and then going out and sourcing it, okay? And so when we looked at your flow chart earlier, the authorization, right, that's that whole requisitioning process. And then once all of the people have signed off based on their limits, okay, then it goes to a purchase order, all right? When you start talking about bids, those are instructions to your office manager, to your business office, to say, this is a contract that either we can source directly, okay, we don't have to do a competitive bid, or in this situation, we need to do a competitive bid. But that has nothing to do with the earlier requisition approval levels. But it sounds like this is kind of blended here. So my question is, at what point, at what dollar amount, does the board actually have to approve spend before it goes in to be sourced?
okay, so for other than contracts for professional services, the superintendent has the authority to approve up to the bid limit. And then anything, any contract for professional service that is more than half the bid limit has to go to the board.
Okay, so it sounds like it's blended. And so what we're saying is, could we go back to that flow chart? All right.
Oops, sorry. Okay.
Okay, so determine purchasing, so let's say that somebody decides that they need to purchase Chromebooks in the amount of $110,000. Okay, so they put in their requisition. It's going to go through hopefully a number of different people who are going to approve it.
Yes.
Okay, at least one, but probably more than one. So they're going to enter it in, and in that purple circle right there, approved purchase requisition, a number of approvers.
Yes.
At some point, it's going to get up to both you and Dr. Triplett, okay? It's not a service, okay? It's a physical good,
Yes.
but it is in excess of $99,000. So at that point, it cannot go into the, it can't go even into bidding, right? So you can't go into bidding. It has to be brought before the board to say, here is a contract that is in excess of $100,000, and the board has to approve it. before we go and send it out to bid. Because the whole concept is that, again, and that's when I've been talking about delegation of authority, that's what I've been talking about, is that at some point, dollar amounts, basically it gets determined to say that some need to be decided by, higher and higher powers. And so at some point, it sounds like what we're saying is that once it reached the $100,000 level, that it needs to be approved. It needs to be approved in that purple box or that purple circle before any type of additional purchasing happens. Because you could end up wasting a whole bunch of time going out and getting competitive bids, et cetera, if the board says, hey, we don't approve this.
No, we have the authority to go out to bid, but we can't award the bid until it goes to the board.
That's correct.
So if there's an item that we estimate, we know it's projected to be over the bid limit, we have the authority to go out to bid, but we can't award it until we take it to the board.
Yeah.
So we don't get approval, we're not required to get approval to go out to bid. So that's also in the board policy. It's
Right,
not,
you include-
it's not included here.
That's why you include language typically.
Yes.
That says, just because we issued this RFP or this
Yeah.
proposal,
Yeah.
we're not necessarily gonna commit to it because it requires further
Yes.
board action.
Yes.
But you can, because otherwise the processes if you run those processes in sequence, it could be a much longer, much
Yes.
more
It's too
cumbersome.
long, yeah.
Yes.
But there is the risk that you'll go down the road with a project that the board doesn't want to do. But again, if it's all happening under the budget, that seems highly unlikely.
Yeah.
If the budget already says there should be X amount of Chromebooks, then I think staff has sort of a reason to believe that the board would approve it. And then you put caveats in the contract, in the RFP that says, if the board doesn't approve it, then we're under no obligation to do anything.
Yes. And then our Director of Fiscal Services, who's also our Purchasing Director, because we don't have one, she will flag those items that are above the bid limit, and if she doesn't have a board approval as backup, it won't go through. So we're aware of what the limits are in the board policy and what can be approved and what needs to go to the board. So
Because
it will not generate a PO unless we have the board approval on any items that are above the bid limit.
Because, I'll just tell you that, right, in business, you would never see this, where literally you would have to get, whatever the dollar amount is, you would have to get the approval for everybody determined by dollar amount at that purple circle before you went in and started to do the purchasing. And the whole idea behind it is, why are you going to waste a whole bunch of time, right? So you're going to potentially waste those staff resources' time in going out and putting together a potential project, going out and getting all bids together.
It won't go there. So if it's something that's going out to bid, the requisition will not be entered until it's actually gone to the board.
Right,
Yeah.
but by the way, so I think that the staff, based on obviously if the staff is going to be doing an RFP for a project that's not in the budget, then it would be prudent to bring that to the board first, because it's a new concept, right? But if it's covered under the umbrella of the budget, I think staff should be able to do the administrative processes to move the project along, with subject to final approval of the board when it comes to delivering the product.
I'm in agreement with that, and that's how the processes are at the local state level also, is that during budget session reviews, or building the budget for the next fiscal year, there's already, departments already know exactly what it is that they want to spend next year's budget on, and they're making those requests, and they're budgeting for it. So once the budget is put in place and approved by city council, or in this case, the board, the staff has the ability to go out and bid for those projects, and then get formal approval to award the bid.
Yes,
In the form of an RFP, once the RFPs are approved by,
yes,
by the department or whoever's going out for bid, right?
right,
Right.
And then it comes back into this process
yes.
where, once it is approved by the board,
The
it
board,
goes to the purchase order requisition request, and then that's when the PO is issued for that bid.
Right.
So, I mean, that's how we've seen it done.
No, I think that's,
Yeah,
I
and
think
that's
that's
the
the proper way.
standard process. So, we go out to bid, and then we have our bid results, we take it to the board and recommend approval. And once the board approves it, that's when we will enter it into the system.
Now, is there, I'm sorry, we're getting off the subject. It's not off the subject, it's in the general area. We usually hear that a project's going to be sent out to bid as part of the superintendent's report or
Yes.
something like that.
Yeah.
But is there any systematic way where the board would know that staff was working on an RFP for, because RFPs are only going to be happening for fairly large ticket items, right? And is there a systematic way for the board to know that so we don't get surprised?
Yes.
Other than just it being, happened to be mentioned in the superintendent's report?
Yeah, we try to provide those in the staff report. For example, you recall the junior high stairs. We presented the concept, the idea, and before we went out to bid, made sure that the board understood, what we were trying to do. And it wasn't until we presented it to the board that we actually went out to bid. So anything like that, the big projects, we will always try to provide the board with background before actually taking the award, so that you're not seeing it for the first time as a bid award. Yeah.
No, I appreciate that.
But no purchase order will be created for greater than 99,000 in a goods situation, or 49,000 in a services situation, without approval by the board.
Yes.
Okay.
Just being conscious of time, we have
Yeah, a
about
few minutes.
8 minutes. We have, I think, we put 4 more slides, but then the discussion, we could certainly.
We've been discussing this.
That's,
It's been good discussion, so
Yeah,
this is good.
and we can certainly bring this back for more conversation.
So the next couple should be fairly quick. So these are the contracts that still have to go through the board regardless of the dollar amount. Any employment contracts, any negotiated labor agreements, contracts over half the bid limit, any sale of real property, interagency agreements, any contracts that are beyond the bid limit, or purchase of equipment, and then facilities. And this is where the CUPCA we talked about, that's the $200,000 limit. So any contracts above the California Uniform Public Construction Cost Accounting Act, which is also known as CUPCA, and that's the $200,000.
But one thing also, just to clarify, going back there, so where it says the board retains authority, so the board retains authority for any and all, retains the authority for everything, okay? And the board delegates that. So if the board decides that they ultimately want to come back and change that, they have the full authority to do that. Okay,
The policy and the ARs, yes.
okay.
As a previous board had in fact imposed the requirement that if it's half the bid limit, it has to come for professional services. That was something that a previous board had decided was a good practice, and they imposed it regardless of what is typical standard.
Yes, so this AR is particular to Newark Unified.
Okay.
And yes, the board can change it if they wish. So these are the agenda items that are related to these board policies. We present the warrant report on a monthly basis. This complies with the BP 3300 and 3310 with regards to expenditures and purchases. And then the quarterly contract report, which complies with the BP and AR 3312 with regards to contracts. And this is where we present the contracts that are professional services contract over $10,000, but under half the bid limit. So this was the optional board agenda item for consideration. There is a purchase order report that could be generated. So this would present a list of all the purchase transactions for goods and services. As compared to the warrant report that shows the payments for goods and services received, the PO report is an opportunity to see POs that have been processed, normally before the goods and services have been received. These are all the purchase orders that have been processed. So in a way, you can look at it, this is like before goods and services are received, the warrant report is after. That's the final actual expenditure.
And is that report available to the public? The purchase
It's
order?
not part of our agenda now. That's why we're saying this is another item, and the reason why we're providing this as an option is because it does allow the board to see, other than the warrant report, the POs that have been processed.
Is that a lot of staff effort to generate this report, or?
No, it's part of our escape system.
Thank you.
Yeah, so part of what we want to ask of the board tonight, not that the board needs to make a decision tonight, but if that's something that the board would like to see on a regular basis, that it's something that we could.
Yeah, so it shows the PO number, the vendor name, what location, that code there is, what location it's for. And then a brief description of what it's for, and then the budget code in this particular case will just show the fund number and the object code. It's not as detailed as the warrant report, which gives you the full account stream.
Yes, I'd like to have that report included, not only for our edification, but it would help the public to understand sort of this whole process of where a PO's been issued, but then, for example, bills might come in every month, and it can be confusing to people on the outside when they don't see the overarching issue. So
Right, so if there's
again, with the caveat that I don't want this to take a large amount of staff time. So if you're saying it doesn't, then I would like to see it.
Yes, so, that's a good point, because, like you said earlier, we might have a $100,000 PO for, let's say, transportation, but then you're only seeing the $10,000 payments.
Yeah.
You're not seeing the actual purchase order for that service. So, this provides a little bit more information.
Right, and back to Aiden's, one of his first points, I'm sorry, Member Hill's first points, we also wouldn't know whether the purchase order that the warrant that we just saw just used up 90% of that budget. So if we saw both, we'd be able to sort of put two and two together.
Right.
So thank you.
And when you say fund object, so that's the account number.
That is the account number, so that's the fund number. 010 is general fund, and then the object code 5828, it's 5800 account, so it's for services and other operating expenditures.
Okay, great.
So all of these are, you can see the object code is 5,000. I can tell you that that's all for services and other operating expenditures, which they are. And then if you see something, therapy travelers, you see two codes there. That means that PO was split coded. So part of it was coded to 5100, another part was coded to 5825. And then, let's see. Yeah, so that's the general format of that PO report. If there are any other clarifying questions, which we've kind of already answered and addressed along the way, we'll be happy to.
Yeah, so just want to ask that, what is our strategy when it comes to purchase order or bid, where you can have several separate purchase orders, but they're all somehow related to each other. So let's say 3 purchase orders, each of them under 40,000, but they are in many ways related to each other. So they add up together, it's more than 100,000. So in that case, conceptually they're related, so they're over the 100,000 limit, so the board should be approving that. But individually, because they are 30,000, 40,000, so the board doesn't need to approve that.
I think based on the vendor, right, if it's all from the same vendor, then.
So
It's the vendor and the commodity, and the service. So we try to consolidate when we can. So if we know, for example, the Chromebooks, we know that every school needs 50 Chromebooks. rather than have the schools order 50 at a time, which is also called bid splitting. We try to consolidate and provide the best price.
Yeah, because sometimes if you bid split, you will encounter that scenario, that individual bid is not over the limit. Together, they're over the limit.
Yeah. So
Well, and this is kind of a common thing that potentially happens, right? Is that you've got a manager that is trying to avoid having oversight of their spend, and so they take and break it up into amounts that's below their signing level, so that, again, people higher up don't see it. And so, but that's where in your flow chart, there needs to be, and there, hopefully there is somebody on the accounting end
Yeah.
that's doing a check and balance and saying, hey, hold on a second, right? There's, three requisitions for essentially the same thing, right? And then when we add this up, this really needs to be consolidated into a larger PO, which then needs to get brought before the board for approval. So is that happening in the business office?
yes, we do have those checks and balances, and our director does monitor all of those types of purchases.
Okay.
And those kinds of issues would be able to be tracked by the board if the report was brought forward.
Yes.
We'd see those 3 POs for ABC computers, and that were all 35,000, and it would even if the staff missed it, the board could raise it as a red flag.
So President Nguyen, we are about 3 minutes over, I believe.
Yes.
But Member Grindal, you articulated that you would be interested in that report. Is that the consensus of the board?
Yes.
Okay.
Sure.
I mean, and if there's a way, right, because you mentioned that it is an automated report, right? So it's a pre-built report that's coming out of this escape system. I mean, if there's a way that we could also just post it on our website, right? So literally just gets dropped out so that everybody sees it, and we do it on a monthly basis, I think that would be great from a transparency perspective.
Yeah, but in the form of, because, it's part of the board approval process, that's also public information,
Yeah.
so
So it'd be on our
it
website.
would be on the
Yeah.
agenda.
It would be on the agenda to the.
Well, what I'm saying is, why can't we just put it on the website,
But
like every month?
It is technically
it
on,
is on the website.
it is technically on the website.
If it's
Through,
brought to the board.
Right, but you could put a link to it. I mean, it
Right.
wouldn't seem that hard to just, and maybe the warrant report as well, just to have a link for someone who's interested in that much detail. They could, without having to sort through our
Right,
agendas.
correct.
We'll,
Again, what I'm cautious of is creating a burden on staff in either case. But otherwise, I think it's useful for the board and transparent for the community. I support that.
yeah, I think one or the other, when you're talking about burden, if we have to post it on the agenda and then think about where we're going to post it on the website, when it literally is already on the website, when we post it in public for the board agenda, that would be the more
Yeah, and
effective.
I would leave that, and maybe the rest of the board doesn't agree, I'd leave that up to your
Yeah.
discretion. I would point out, though, that you will see a reduction in public records requests if it's very easy to find. We get public record requests for things that have been part of our agendas, and because people don't know where they are, so it goes through that process rather than people simply getting the information that they want. So-
And to that point, right, I mean, I've seen a lot in many companies that I've worked with, where if it's an automated report, literally, you just have a developer write a quick, essentially routine that says, once this report gets generated, it gets dropped into this particular file folder, and boom, it's there, right? And so then after that, there's zero effort. It just happens every month. It automatically runs every month.
We will
Okay.
consider that, yep. Well, thank you.
Okay,
Very
thank
good
you.
discussion.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So starting next month.
Field report.
I didn't ask for a start date, by the way. Thanks for volunteering that. That's
We'll have a backup recovery.
Okay.
It was all those reports.
That was the PO report.
All right, next item on our agenda is closed session. Are there any public comments on closed session items? Okay. So in closed session, we will be discussing items 4.2, public employee discipline dismissal release, 4.3, conference with labor negotiators, employee organizations, NTA and CSCA. Item 4.4, conference with labor negotiators, employee group NUMA, unrepresented supervisors and contracted management. 4.5, conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation, significant exposure to litigation pursuant to Government Code 54956.9. And we will be recessing to closed session now. Thank you. Can we just reconvene to open session? There are no reportable actions from closed session. We'll move on to item 5.1, Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Next up, so item 6 is report of closed session items. There are no reportable action taken. So we'll move on to item 7, a student report. And I will pass it on to do we have any students from the junior high tonight?
Good evening, board members. My name is Mohammed Lulu, the ASB president of Newark Junior High School. We are currently planning future school events. Some of these include a Spirit Week at the end of January. We are also planning to sell Valentine grams. These may include roses or other items. Now, I'm going to pass it on to Purvi.
Good evening, board members. My name is Purvi Sharma, the ASB Vice President of NJHS. We are also planning an art contest for our yearbook cover. The winner's artwork will be chosen as the cover, and there will be awards for the runner-ups. Thank you. Have a great evening.
Thank you, Mohammed and Purvi. Next up is our representative. Okay, next up is our student representative, student board member, Estaina Rendiz-Ortiz. Go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I hope y'all enjoy the holidays. As Newark Memorial High has come back, a lot has been happening, to say the least. First, I'd like to start off with upcoming events. On January 27th, during school hours, NMHS will hold our annual town hall regarding gender identity and how we as a community and school can become more inclusive towards others and addressing the issues students face with gender identity and how we can become more inclusive about these things. Following this, we will be holding our elections for class and ASB representatives, so I encourage anyone who's interested in running for a position. Additionally, stay tuned for our Multicultural Week and Annual Hats Assembly on March 18th, where students can represent their culture on a variety of ways. And as of recently, Wing Crew went to freshman classes to help the lowerclassmen understand and learn about the importance of making decisions and how these choices will affect their present and future. They hope to continue on these lessons, and I truly appreciate the efforts. The same can be said about the cheerleaders who are hosting a cheer camp for elementary kids and teaching them all about cheer and even allowing them to perform with them at future basketball games. Furthermore, Newark Memorial High offered free rapid COVID tests to each student in their 4th period class this Tuesday. While the effort will hopefully help our student body stay safe over these troubling times, I would like to bring up the fact that Newark Unified School District should have been far better prepared in allowing students to come back on campus without any conditions set. Thank you.
All right, thank you, student board member. And we're moving on to item 8.1, employee organizations. There are no representatives tonight. Okay, we'll move on to item 9 on the agenda, recognitions and celebration, 9.1, staff spotlight. I'm handing it over to Superintendent Report.
Thank you, President Nguyen. Good evening, board members again, and staff, as well as community and students at home. So this evening we wanted to shine a light on some of our outstanding employees that have just been doing amazing work. The first one is Ms. Stephanie Schubert. She is a resource specialist in special education at Birch Grove Intermediate. And Stephanie is, she's actually also the lead RSP teacher for the district. She's an incredible collaborative problem solver. She does whatever it takes for students and families, and so we greatly appreciate all of her work. And so please join me in celebrating Ms. Schubert. And secondly, we have Mr. Emilio Lopez Martinez. He is our maintenance technician at the Maintenance Operations and Transportation Department, MOT. And Emilio is an amazing hard worker. He does whatever it takes to get the job done, helps out all of his colleagues, and is really supporting the schools tremendously in so many different ways. So please join me in appreciating Emilio Lopez Martinez. And then last but certainly not least, we wanted to celebrate our NUMA member for the evening, Miss Jessica Ricketts. Jessica is she's an administrative assistant in the special education office. And Jessica is just amazing support for both the department as well as just an incredibly dedicated individual who supports our students and our families and our teachers to, in particular, address the needs of students with special needs. Incredible work ethic, and she really ensures the department is running effectively. So please join me in appreciating Jessica Ricketts. And those are our staff spotlights for this evening.
Thank you, Superintendent Triplett. On to item 10, public comments on non-agenda items. Do we have any? We have two. Thank you.
We have two virtual comments. The first one is from Cindy Parks. Ms. Parks, you may begin.
Good evening and Happy New Year to one and all. I hope you took the time to read through the email I sent you over the holiday break. I attached two documents from the League of California Cities. They were guidelines for the California Public Records Act and the Brown Act. As a governmental agency, it is your responsibility to us, the public, to conduct business as prescribed. The guidelines are clear and concise documents with scenario examples. The Brown Act guideline pertained to the public comment on non-agenda items states, while the Brown Act does not allow discussion or action on these items, not on the agenda, it does allow members of the legislative body or its staff to briefly respond to comments or questions from members of the public, provide a reference to staff or other resources for factual information, or direct staff to place the issue on a future agenda. Only recently has the Newark Unified Board deviated from a similar practice. I hope you will also pay close attention to the requirements outlined in the California Public Records Act document, especially those on page 21. Neither the 10-day response period for responding to a request for a copy of records, nor the additional 14-day extension may be used to delay or obstruct the inspection of public records. For example, requests for commonly disclosed records that are held in a manner that allows for prompt disclosure should not be withheld because of the statutory response period. NUSD just settled a court case with Ms. Clinton and had to release records and provide financial compensation. You currently have several outstanding requests. I am missing one of my requests from May, and on November 24th, I requested 3 documents. On December 8th, when I didn't receive any communication, I sent a follow-up email, and Ms. Gutierrez replied, apologizing for the delay in response, and said she did not notice the email sooner. However, they would work on this ASAP. I haven't received any other correspondence as of this date. In all of my years submitting requests to NUSD and other governmental organizations, I have never experienced these types of delays or had my requests ignored. Now I would like to address the current guidelines Newark Unified is using when a student has tested positive for COVID. I hope the superintendent will be addressing this during his report. Our County Office of Education just released new guideline booklet yesterday. In that document, it contained guidelines, a chart with 3 exposure options. In light of all of the learning loss and social and emotional issues highlighted in your boardroom, I would certainly hope that this district would implement the new 7-day in-school modified quarantine option. That scenario allows for students, vaxxed or not, who even though they have been in proximity of a student that is tested positive, to continue with on-site education as long as they test negative. To reduce some more learning loss and social isolation, please implement the 7-day in-school modified quarantine
Thank you, Ms.
option.
Parks.
And please attach the study session presentation as it was not legible to the public this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Parks. Next speaker.
Could I make a follow-up request related to this? Yeah, so I'd just like to make a request because,
No, not at this time. Can you save your request until the end of the?
so I think what she just read to us indicates that this is a time when we could
No, point of
make a
order.
comment.
Are you commenting back to her, or are you directing?
So I
the
believe that
superintendent?
the information that she read from the Brown Act and Ed Code allows us to make a comment. Okay. She just cited it.
Superintendent?
Sorry, if there's a request, there is a section for requests at the end, and we'd be happy to hear any requests. But the current agenda item was public comment on non-agenda items, not discussion.
But it says that we as a board can respond back.
No, the public commenter said that, but I don't believe that that's what.
Well, she was
the board is
citing
directing.
various.
Okay, next, can we move on to the next speaker, please?
The next speaker is Christine Clinton. Ms. Clinton, you may begin.
Good evening. Just to be clear, this comment is not an ambush. This is a public meeting where the public has a right to speak, and you have an obligation to listen. You had an obligation to listen when community members warned you of a 360.
It's fine, it's on their end.
Legal obligation in providing her child with the services outlined in her child's IEP. Instead, you waved her off and dismissed her, later saying you don't listen to public speakers, only to the people who meet with you in private in the days leading up to a meeting. That's convenient for you to have a one-on-one and manipulate the community's messages and keep what's said off the public record. It is not our responsibility to reach out to each of you privately. You ignored this parent's private emails and her public comments. As a parent of a child with an IEP, my heart breaks for her and all the other special ed families at the way they are being treated by you. Do better, board. Just do better. You are the reason people are pulling their children from this district in droves. Next, I want to talk about your legal obligation to respond to CPRAs in a timely manner. On June 17th, you shared with the community that you understood the law and had no desire to follow it. The community's only recourse is to file a writ of mandate, which I did on June 28th. It took $435 of my own money and countless hours of my own time, but you ended up having to respond to each and every request outlined in that writ. You had to pay your lawyer $450 an hour to deal with my lawsuit, and you ended up approving a settlement to reimburse me for my fees. Did you learn any lesson in this? I don't think you did, because I have a newer request that is now 3 weeks past due, and you now want another 30 days to complete it. Other community members who have reached out to me for help also have past due requests. You said at a study session that you want to minimize your CPRA liability. Then do that by fulfilling these requests. It is the only way. Otherwise, you will have more lawsuits. I promise you that. Is that how you want to spend the district's money? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Clinton. On to item 11.1, Superintendent Report. Superintendent Triplett.
Thank you, President Nguyen. Ms. Gutierrez, can we have the deck, please? Okay. So this evening we have two agenda items for the Superintendent Report. The first is a celebration and an appreciation. If you go to the next slide, please. With regard to the holiday giveaways that occurred during right before and during the holiday break. And then number two is a COVID-19 update. Next slide, please. So we just want to give a really strong appreciation for some of the amazing efforts that staff and community and students did right around the holidays to really make sure that the holidays were joyous for as many families and students and young people as possible. So this is a picture of a holiday gift giveaway, which I'll speak more about in a minute, that occurred at Newark Memorial. I believe it was on the 20th of December. And this is some of the staff and families wrapping gifts for children. Next slide, please. So on the 20th, this is really just really touching and amazing. There was a family who have children in NUSD and who both graduate, parents who both graduated from NUSD, who organized of their own volition, organized a gift drive at their home. They were able to collect 759 gifts, and then they brought them to Newark Memorial and coordinated with staff there to set up a distribution. And then NUSD volunteers, students, staff, and families came together on Sunday prior, and then also came back again on Monday to set it up, make it just really wonderful, and then distribute the gifts and do like they set up essentially like a shopping system so that families in need could come and shop for gifts for their children. It was just really tremendous. 757 gifts were distributed on that day. Next slide, please. The other event that occurred with Newark Memorial teams and clubs, my understanding is that the groups adopted 33 families for gifts, and so they were able to collect gifts for those families and deliver families those gifts for their children. So another just amazing effort. There were other really incredible efforts as well that occurred. I know that in partnership with Viola Blythe, there was a wonderful giveaway at Schilling Elementary, and I think there was others that occurred also during and right before the break. So just wanted to share that and really appreciate everyone who participated and really thought of others during the holiday season. Shifting gears to COVID-19 and updates here. As you all know, we're experiencing across the world a unprecedented surge in COVID-19, in particular the Omicron variant. So I wanted to share a little bit of data and information about the steps that we've been taking to try to mitigate and support our families and students during this time. Next slide, please. So first, we were able to distribute at-home tests. This is actually not an official photo of the tests that we distributed, but it's something I got on Google. But similar at-home tests to every student in the district. We received 5,500, I believe, at-home tests from the county. Unfortunately, this was something that Governor Newsom and the state government was funding. Unfortunately, I think because of the snow in the Sierras, there was a delay in these arriving into county office. But they did arrive, and we were able to pick them up and get them distributed to our students on this Tuesday. That in addition to, Ms. Gutierrez, next slide, please. So this is in addition to our regular testing, which has continued. So we test testing is available for students and staff every day of the week on a rotating basis. So this week this is the schedule and the number of folks who were tested this week. And so what happens is, for example, Monday, the testing lab, it's a traveling testing lab, and it was at BGI, BGP, and the junior high. And then you can see the following day it's at Coyote Hills, Kennedy, Child Care, and Newark Memorial. And so it rotates through the week. The thing that we were able to add starting on Monday, which I really want to give a shout out to Ms. Dela Cruz and the whole team for having the foresight to put this together in advance of the holidays, And this is something that other districts honestly just have not done, and I think it's been a real benefit to the community, is that we were able to set up a free testing site at Whiteford. And that's, like I said, started on Monday. You can see every day around, on average, 300 people have been tested, and that's free to the community. It's drive-through. And as I look at the news from around the country and read news about people who have had to wait for 4 hours, 6 hours, all day for a test. Currently, the wait, there is a little bit of a wait at Whiteford, but it's around 30 minutes, I think. And if you drive by, you can see the line and folks waiting. They are offering, again, free tests. It's for students, for families, or community members. And this is both, they offer both rapid antigen as well as the PCR. So really an amazing service. And then you can see as of today, we've been able to test a total of 2,165 people through this system, in addition to the 5,000, in theory, the 5,000 odd students that received an at-home test as well. Just want to reiterate that there is no current testing mandate. So testing is voluntary, and so students, families, for this testing, families have to give permission to test, but families can sign up for this. They've been able to sign up since this began at the beginning of the year, and they can continue to sign up for this and receive this testing every week. And likewise, the clinic at Whiteford is open Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. So really amazing service. Shifting gears a little bit, so this is data received today with regard to our current vaccination rates. So unfortunately, our ages 12 through 17, despite a lot of work on many people, have our rates still are in the lower section of our county. So you can see Newark is second to last, just before Emeryville in terms of percentage of young people 12 to 17 who have been fully vaccinated. Little bit of good news, if you go to the next slide. This is the similar data, but for ages 5 to 11 who have received at least one dose. And as you can see, Newark actually has a little bit of a higher percentage there than many of the surrounding areas. And we're currently at 37.7% of those young people having received one dose. So I bring this up just because we want to really continue to encourage vaccinations. If you go to the next slide, Ms. Gutierrez. We continue to have our vaccination clinics every Sunday. It's a free vaccination clinic at Coyote Hills. I went right before the break and got my booster shot there. Super easy. Everyone is really friendly. While I was there, I saw young kids getting vaccinated. I saw older folks getting their first dose. I saw families there. So anybody who needs a first dose, a second dose, or a booster is welcome to come. And as you probably know, they just approved the booster for ages 12 through 17, I believe. So I just want to confirm, but I believe that those boosters will be available this Sunday for that age group at Coyote Hills.
And flu.
Sorry?
And flu.
And the flu vaccine, even better. And that is the report for this evening.
Thank you. Member Hill?
Thank you, Dr. Triplett, for the report. So, a couple questions. So I've been hearing from a few community members that at a couple of schools, when there have been COVID cases that have been identified with students in the classrooms, that the teachers have been dismissing the entire class. And I think it was like at BGI in Lincoln. And I wanted to check and see if that's true, and if so, why are we taking that approach?
Yeah, thank you for that question. Yes, so what happens when there is a positive case in the classroom, then we do contact tracing, and that's supported by the County Office of Public Health. If it's determined that there's two reasons why an entire class would be quarantined. One would be if the transmission has spread throughout the classroom. That currently, and for this entire year, we haven't had one of those situations. But the second situation is when we try to do contact tracing, if we're unable to identify close contacts, and that might be because the students, for example, had some sort of activity where they were all mixed up together rather than in their assigned seats. In those cases where we can't verify close contact, then the contact tracers have to act with an abundance of caution and notify everyone that they may have been a close contact. Those cases are not that frequent, although we have experienced them even this week. That has been the case in a couple of situations. And really just making sure that we are being as safe as possible to stop the spread.
One of the reasons for my question is, so as you know, I work at Cupertino High School, so we face exactly the same situation. And our protocol, and literally I just had this invoked today with one of my students in one of my classes, is that if a student tests positive, if anybody tests positive, they have to notify the administration. The administration then goes through a potential contact tracing scenario. So obviously, if a student, they're going to look and see which, in upper levels, they're going to look at if what classes that student attends. If it's elementary, they're going to be looking at a specific class. But then the immediate, essentially, focus is not only what class is that person in, but then who were potentially people who were close contacts. And so literally I was asked by my administration to tell me, okay, who is this person sitting next to? And so then the instructions after that are that those people need to go and get tested. So nobody gets dismissed. The presumption is that you're COVID-free until you're proven, COVID, infected with COVID. And so sort of the next steps for me, as well as for a couple of students, is to go and get tested. And then based on that, if you come back positive, then those people need to quarantine. But we wouldn't have to dismiss the entire class. And given the challenges that we've had around learning loss, et cetera, it seems to me that could be maybe, if we're dismissing the whole class, that could be an extreme measure. And could we implement instead a program like this where when we identify close contacts, we have them test, and those that come back positive, those are the ones that go in quarantine?
So, yeah, I'm happy to provide to the board at another meeting sort of an explanation of the county guidelines around how contact tracing works and isolation and quarantine. But essentially, we're following the county guidelines. And so we're doing what's required and mandated. We can't do it any other way. I don't know about your situation in your school, and I do know it's in a different county, but it could be that based on the fact that you are with high schoolers, that if everyone is vaccinated, then there's different steps. But if we have people who are unvaccinated in the class, then there's certain steps and precautions that have to be taken. And likewise, like I said, if it's a classroom where we can identify who are the close contacts, then only those people are in need of communication. But if there's a situation, and again, it doesn't happen all the time, but sometimes it does, where we're unable to identify who the student who has tested positive was close to. In other words, the teacher says, I don't know, I think we had this activity, everyone was running around, everyone was mixed up, so he or she could have been close to almost everybody. Those are the situations where we do have to quarantine the entire class.
So I went out to the county website and I didn't see those protocols.
Okay. Well, I'm happy to share them with you. I'm happy to have our liaison come to the board and share out the processes and protocols, and happy to point you to where they can be found on the website.
Because again, I mean, I think it's, as you say, there may be a situation where we can't tell exactly if people are moving around who has contact and who doesn't. But it seems to me that rather than bringing in a very harsh measure, that there should be an interim step to say, if we can't determine that, everybody in the class needs to get tested, not that we stop the class.
Yeah, we can't actually force people to be tested. If someone tests positive, then we can require that in order to return in a certain time frame that they have to test again. But we actually can't mandate that people are tested. It's illegal.
So it's my understanding that actually if you are not vaccinated, that you can require testing. But if you're vaccinated, then there are slightly different rules, and I believe that that's a statewide rule.
No, I'm looking at right now on the California Department of Public Health and some of the guidelines right here. Everyone, regardless of vaccination status, previous infection, or lack of symptoms, here's the recommended actions. If unable to test or choosing not to test, then they, in this case, in this particular scenario, the isolation can only end after day 10. So just one example, but...
Right, so are we offering them the opportunity to test before dismissing the class?
Oh, we offer, like I showed up there, yeah, we're having all sorts of opportunities for students to test, but we only test with the permission of the families. We do not test unless families have given permission.
All right. Any other board members who have questions or comments? Member Grandel?
Thank you. Just wanted to ask how you managed to distribute all the test kits to the children without causing a giant traffic jam.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean, the person you saw up there in the spotlight, Mr. Emilio, was one of an amazing team in MOT who just jumped right the minute that the tests were made available at the county, was there 8 a.m. on Monday morning to pick them up, and then distribute them all to the different sites. And then at the sites, our office staff and our support staff have just been tremendous, dealing with contact tracing while doing things like that, disseminating all of the tests to all the different classrooms and making sure that every student gets one.
Well, my compliments to that. In addition, I'm wondering whether you do or whether you could give out the vaccination location information as a part of the testing process. If people could be given notification of what's happening at Coyote Hills once they're getting their test, so they, hopefully they get a, yay, I'm negative, but let's go take care of this issue. So just wanted to, while it's on their mind, maybe they could, maybe it's already done, maybe there's already a poster, but perhaps that's an opportunity to outreach. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It hopefully is, but we can go back and check and make sure that all of our testing sites do have the information around the vaccinations. We have posted all of the vaccination information on our websites and then also on social media and in our main offices as well. But can't hurt to say it all the time, often, and a lot.
Right. Well, you've got a captive audience waiting their half hour to get their test, and they've got COVID on their mind. So maybe that's a good time to hit them.
Yes, thank you.
Member Rendiz-Ortiz?
I'd like to ask if the rapid COVID test is something we can hopefully continue on if the pandemic seems to continue. Like, will this be something we give every break if the county allows it, or is that up to us?
Yeah, thank you. So as I'm sure all of you know, the home tests right now are almost impossible to find. I've heard rumors of them, in other places in the country being sold on the black market for $200 a test and all this kind of stuff. So we received those from the state, and that was a specific state allocation. When we did receive them, what the message that we got was that the intention was for more to be distributed moving forward. However, what I heard today was that there are no more tests at the state level, no more at-home tests at the state level currently. So I just don't know. I guess we'll have to wait and see. But I do really want to strongly recommend the testing system that we have set up. Honestly, it's the lab tests are much more effective than the at-home tests, and we offer it every single day for free, 9 to 5. Monday through Friday. Yeah, I really want to encourage people to utilize the service. It's really tremendous.
All right, thank you.
Mhm.
Can I have one follow-up to that, Madam President? Is that true even over a break? So like during the holiday break, were those testing centers open?
No, so the Whiteford clinic started on Monday, and then the other ones are in schools. So the public actually can't go into the school to get tested, but they can go to Whiteford. And the Predicin does not offer the service on the weekends.
Although we are looking into it.
Oh, and hot off the presses, Ms. Dela Cruz says we're looking into the possibility of weekends as well.
That was going to be my follow-up point. Thank you. Because member Resendez Ortiz sort of raised a good point of families that want to be sure they didn't catch COVID while they're over a holiday, being able to have that peace of mind. If there's a way for us to fire up a testing process before a long break, before return for a long break, it might be great.
Yeah, thank you. It is, it was approached differently by different school districts, and some of that was based on there were a small handful of districts in our area that received tests prior to the break as a pilot. So that was not something that was made available to all districts. I will say that in those cases, it's not necessarily the best option. For example, I know in where my children go to school, they received, or my daughter actually, my other one's in college. My younger one received the test prior to break with the instruction to use the test in the 48 hours before returning to school. But given a 2-week break with all kinds of COVID running around and all kinds of worries, she used those before. So she actually didn't have the tests available to use the 48 hours beforehand. So, I think there's what we all need to be conscious of is that we need to be testing, and particularly when we have symptoms. But there is no one best time to test. And if you test on a Saturday and you're looking good, and then you hang out with somebody on a Sunday, the test on Saturday means nothing. So I do think I know it's sort of like it's sort of a paradigm shift, but I think we just need to provide the test option as much as we possibly can in as many different ways as we can, and that's going to be the way that with masking and vaccinations that we get through this.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
Dr. Triplett?
Yes.
If I may, when we partnered with Bay Area Community Health over the holiday break, during their vaccination clinics, they did offer testing at those locations as well.
Oh, thank you. That's right. Sorry, I forgot about that. There was a testing option during the break.
Thank you, Ms. Gutierrez. Okay. On to item 12, new business. 12.1, increase in minimum wage. Dr. Triplett, Superintendent Triplett.
Thank you, President Nguyen. I'm going to turn this one over to Ms. Dela Cruz to talk a little bit about this agenda item.
Thank you, Dr. Triplett. As of January 1st, 2022, the minimum wage is going up from $14 to $15. This impacts a few of our positions that are in the unrepresented group, including our campus monitors in the elementary schools, our classified subs in food service, the child care attendant subs, and also student assistant. So this recommendation is for the board to approve the increase in the minimum wage.
Thank you. We'll open up for discussion. Any members have a question or comment? Okay. Can I get a motion to approve?
I move that we approve the increase on the minimum wage to revise the hourly pay rates because of the increase in minimum wage, effective January 1st, 2022.
Motion made by Member Zhang. And second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Member Grandel. Does student board member get to vote on? It's personnel, right? Salary? Okay. So unfortunately, you won't be able to vote on this one. Member Zhang, how do you vote?
Yes.
Member Hill?
Yes.
Member Grandel?
Yes.
And I also vote yes as well, so four ayes. Thank you. All right, on to item 12.2, Resolution 2021.22.21, overnight field trips, second semester 2021-2022. Dr. Triplett?
Thank you, President Wen. So it does feel, I must say, strange to be talking about this agenda item when we are also talking about Omicron and that we're in the middle of a surge. But this is something that we had talked with the board about prior to the new year. And I know we heard from a number of public speakers, teachers, and parents that a real interest in continuing with Science Camp this year. And so what we had said in the fall was that we would hold off on science camps and overnight field trips in the fall because of COVID-19, and that we would reassess in January. And so that's what we're doing, is bringing forth this resolution. The recommendation is that we do allow for the spring season these overnight field trips with these really strict guidelines for COVID. And the reason that we are recommending this is because the county and the state have likewise, their guidelines now say that it is okay to go on overnight field trips, provided that the guidelines are followed. And so I know that there's schools very eager to continue with the planning process for science camps. I don't think I'm for sure that there's no science camps planned for January. However, these things require a lot of preparation. And so I know that there are schools that have spoken to me, teachers that have spoken to me that really are looking for the board to make a decision so that they can know whether to continue forward with all of the planning and the communication with families that is required to set up these trips for February and beyond. So my hope is that this is a short-lived surge, and thus far the health officials are indicating that that's what they think is going to happen as well. If for whatever reason the COVID takes a really bad turn, then the guidelines from the county and the state will reflect that in terms of overnight trips. And so that is all part of this resolution, where we're recommending to the board that there's approval of trips in the spring, pending no change in the current guidance from the state and county.
Student Board Member Rendiz Ortiz, do you have any comments?
Not at the moment. Thank you.
Member Zhang? Member Hill, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Triplett. So 2 questions. First, is there an expiration date on this, or is it just, until, further notice? So that's the first question. And then the second question is if we do adopt this resolution, will the teachers now be empowered to start planning for this stuff, not only in the spring, but in the fall, et cetera?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so this is just intended for this year. And then unless there's some dramatic negative turn in COVID, then we would anticipate going back to just the regular policies around overnight field trips in the fall. And then your second question was, this would give basically the green light to teachers to really move forward with the planning.
And so could they even plan, further out? I mean, even though this is just for this school year, they could start planning, and then if we needed to update this resolution, for, the fall or whatever, we would be able to do that.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Member Grandel?
Yes, provided that, as the resolution indicates, that if the rules change, if the recommendations change, that our process changes, then I have no problem with this.
I'm also in support of this resolution. So with that said, may I get a motion to approve?
I move that we approve the resolution 2021.22.21 overnight field trips.
I second the motion.
Thank you. So motion made by Member Zhang and seconded by Student Board Member Rendiz Ortiz. Student Board Member, how do you vote?
Yes.
Member Zhang?
Yes.
Member Hill?
Yes.
Member Grandel?
Yes.
Myself, yes. 5 ayes. Thank you. Okay, on to consent agenda, non-personnel items. Oh, sorry. On to item number 13, consent agenda personnel items. We have item 13.2, the personnel report. Superintendent? Oh. Oh, it's on consent, I'm sorry. Sorry about that. So since the item is on consent, may I get a motion to approve the personnel action?
I move to ratify the personnel report as presented.
Thank you.
I'll second.
So motion made by Member Zhang, seconded by Member Grandel. Member Zhang, how do you vote?
Yes.
Member Hill?
Yes.
Member Grandel?
Yes.
And I'm also a yes, so 4 ayes. Thank you. Okay, on to consent agenda items 4.2, contract and purchase orders authorized under Resolution 2020.21-025, delegate authority to procure necessary materials, equipment, and services to provide distance and/or in-person learning to staff, teachers, and students to mitigate the effects of COVID-19. 14.3, Resolution 2021.22.19, declaring surplus equipment. 14.4, minutes of the December 16, 2021 special meeting of the Board of Education, and 14.5, minutes of the December 16 regular meeting of the Board of Education. May I get a motion to approve?
I move to approve.
May I get a second?
I'll second.
Motion made by Member Zhang, seconded by Member Grandel. How do you vote, Student Board Member Rendiz Ortiz?
Yes.
Member Zhang?
Yes.
Member Hill?
Yes.
Member Grandel?
Yes.
I myself is a yes also, 5 ayes. And then on to item 15.1, Board of Education recognition and announcements. Student Board Member, would you like to start?
I would like to give a recognition to all the counselors who are still helping students with college apps and all the teachers who are really putting through everything that's going on right now and thriving for us students. I truly appreciate it.
Thank you. Member Zhang?
Happy New Year's. Hope everybody got a great break. Welcome back. Today's January 6th, and it's 1 year anniversary about what happened last year at this date. As a country, I think all of us should do a little self-reflection on what really happened a year ago this time, because in a democratic republic, things like that don't happen very often. And throughout our history, we do have much closer and much more contentious presidential election, particularly the ones after the Civil War. And we never had anything close to this happening. So I wouldn't want to assign blame to anything, but I think that is a day that our entire country should be doing some soul searching on what happened a year ago.
Thank you. Member Hill?
Yes, thank you. So I'm not familiar with all the details of what's happening at our different schools right now as we've come back from break. I can only comment on what's happening at my own school where I'm teaching. And obviously Omicron is very contagious and spreading rapidly, and it's causing a lot of challenges for students. It's causing a lot of challenges for teachers and for the staff that are supporting the teachers. And I just want to give a shout out to all those people that are navigating through this, because it is a very challenging issue, I think, everywhere, and it's very difficult. And so I just want to acknowledge everybody's efforts.
Thank you. Member Grandel?
I'd like to echo Member Hill's comments about the people dealing with this surge of Omicron, and I have I have heard that there's reason to believe this is going to be a sort of a short-lived spike, and hopefully we can start to put the pandemic in our rearview mirror. But I've said that before, and it's been a while. But anyway, so I do want to second. I want to second Member Hill's recognition of that. I also want to recognize the Alameda County Office of Education. They apparently they received this supply of testing kits, and they weren't notified until after the break. So their staff had to come back in during the holiday break to make sure that they got to us as quickly as they did. And so I really appreciate that effort.
Yes, I too echo the same sentiments as all my fellow board members up here, especially to all the staff, the teachers, and the students who are back in school having to deal with this surge and really persevering through the whole process, and then our additional staff to help, process the COVID tests that were supplied to us and managed to coordinate and hand those out in a timely manner this week. So just wanted to thank everyone for all their hard work and effort and trying to get through this whole thing together. So thank you for that. And on to 15.2, Board of Education Committee reports. Is there anything to report from the Mission Valley ROP?
No, we'll have our meeting probably mid-January for this year.
Anything from
Oh, actually,
Oh,
Member Grindal will be attending the ROP meeting for me, not me anymore.
That is correct.
And I guess, yeah,
anything from SELPA?
no.
Anything from Teachers Induction Advisory Council? No. Anything from the Audit Committee?
Yes, so I had a chance to have a conversation with Dr. Triplett and Ms. Dela Cruz a couple nights ago regarding delegation of authority, since this was the issue that I brought up, and this is what was one of the, I guess the genesis of this most recent study session. And basically, I gave them further clarification around what I was looking for. I think that we as a board got a high-level viewpoint and how that interacts with the board. But my request was really a much more detailed one because it connects potentially with the audit. And so they've assured me that they're going to provide reporting around the desktop procedures that show, we saw the high-level flow chart, but I requested that that they send on the desktop procedures just so we can understand who specifically, and when I say who, I'm talking about roles, what roles get pulled in at different points in the process, and especially as it relates to dollar amounts and signing authority, so that and also as it relates to internal controls, so we make sure that, again, everything is copacetic and that we won't have any material findings from an audit perspective. So I'm looking forward to those reports, so thank you.
Thank you, Member Hill. And then lastly, the last two, the Bond Parcel Tax Committee, there's nothing to report yet. Yes?
No, there's nothing to report.
And then the Liaison Committee.
There is a meeting scheduled for, I believe, the 24th of January.
Thank you. And then on to item 15.3, Board of Education requests. Student board member, do you have any requests?
I don't necessarily have a request, and I don't believe where this falls under. I suppose perhaps a discussion, but I was wondering what goes on with the request that the public comment does have. I forgot the word that they request certain. Ooh, the word just crossed my mind.
So, are you talking when they make a public comment, why can't we respond?
No, I'm wondering the things they request.
Oh, the public records request?
Yes, public records request. What's going on with that, and if there's any way we can better the process of getting things out to the public?
Thank you. Member Zhang?
No request.
Member Hill?
Yeah, I'd like to make two requests. So one is related to the Public Records Act requests. And this has been kind of an ongoing issue, for much of last year and now into this year. And I think that the only way that we can make sure we get our arms around it is to be able to track it. And so I'd like to make a request that on a monthly basis we get a report of all of the public records requests that have been submitted, and then the dates, and then sort of the status, so we can make sure that we're following basically the law in abiding by that. So that's my first request. And then the second request is, when we looked at the COVID update from Dr. Triplett, there was good information talking about the number of sites where we're doing testing, and then also the vaccination rate. But one piece of data that's missing, and I think that would be very helpful, is actually where we are finding positive tests and being able to report that at a minimum at a site level on a monthly basis, and then ideally even at sort of a classroom level. And obviously we can keep the personally identifiable information private. I don't think we need to do that, but I think that this would be very helpful in understanding how prevalent the virus is and where we're seeing outbreaks. I think it will help with contact tracing, and it will also help the board if we see that there's an issue and maybe taking additional action or suggesting additional action. So those are my two requests. So reporting both on CPRA requests as well as reporting on positive COVID tests.
So do we have consensus on the first request from Member Hill?
Yeah, I think the CPRA on a superintendent report once a month, I think that should be fair. So the board can also keep track whether we are at any risk of potential litigation over that, the CPRA. That's for the first one.
Member Grindell?
Yeah, I was going to say, I'd like to hear from staff, whether it's at this time or at a further follow-up, as to what the impact would be, and whether the impact on staff effort would be, as well as whether or not this what's being requested by Member Hill is something we can do legally.
For item 1 or item?
Item 1.
Okay.
So just so I'm understanding, is that the consensus of the board, is to come back with?
No, we don't have consensus yet.
I was looking for information either tonight or later about what the impact of the list of PRA requests would be on your staff effort, and whether or not it's appropriate and legal to do so. If you could speak to it now, that's great. Otherwise, a report back would make sense.
Yeah, I think we would need to report back on that.
Okay. So it's 2-2.
Well,
At this point, there's no consensus, but it sounds like Member Grindal is asking for additional information.
Correct.
So if the other two board members agree with additional information, then this can come back.
So Member Grindal, when you say additional information, you want to do it in a superintendent report or just a staff report?
I would leave that up to the superintendent. Sorry, I would leave that to the
Because
superintendent.
6-7 months ago, there was a superintendent report where we did talk about the information about CPRA. So that was something I was expecting.
Well, my question is, maybe I should be more clear. My question is what the impact on staffing, on staff effort, as well as any challenges legally and procedurally.
Yeah, that's fine with me as well.
And I'd like to just comment that fulfilling these requests is a legal requirement. And we are obviously in breach of duty there, and we've been in breach of duty for a long period of time. And so I think it is our right and our responsibility to make sure that gets driven down, because we hear this, we literally get emails all the time, and we hear this in every board meeting. And the only way that we're going to be able to address that is to start to get a handle on status and watching that status go down. And I think that we can certainly omit any particular detail that is private, but simply being able to identify, here's a request, here's the date that it came in, and here's the status, and when is it due, and when do we actually start violating CPRA rules. I think it's as simple as that.
Okay. So Do we have consensus for a report out before we decide on whether or not the request for the report is made?
Well, I agree with that. That there be a report before we make a decision.
Okay. Do we, member?
I agree on that as well.
Okay, great. So we have consensus for a report out prior to making a decision. Thank you. And then on the second item in regards to identifying the location of the positive COVID cases at school sites, do we have consensus on that?
I think at the beginning of the.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, sorry,
Superintendent.
if I may, I believe this was something that came up prior and that the board already had consensus on not wanting that information. And I will say, I mean, I can go back and explain again why we don't give that information and why, yeah, I'm happy to explain that again if the board wishes to go over this again.
I guess it has to do with if you report one particular site that say has a lot of COVID cases, the problem is you're raising social stigma about that particular school site. That's number two. If let's say one school site only have 1 or 2 COVID cases, even without identifying the name and the person on the school, you sort of are identifying the person because everybody knows that one person is the one that got COVID.
Yes.
That's correct. Thank you.
So I just like to, again, circumstances change, right? Obviously, we're dealing with a very contagious situation here. The only way, again, that you solve any problem is through data. And I think we can put protections in to, you know, again, avoid identifying individuals, and even if it's just at the site level, but if the state were taking the same type of approach and saying, well, we can't actually measure what's going on in a particular city because, you know, we've got, you know, again, who knows, maybe lower socioeconomic status and somehow that's stigmatizing people, then the state would never be able to get its arms around the situation and be able to solve it. And so I think in our situation, we have to see what's going on and to identify what potential types of mitigations need to be put in place.
Okay. Member Grindel?
The staff is already looking at that information and uses their professional judgment, and I'm comfortable with that approach. I don't support the idea of disclosing on a site level for the reasons stated by the superintendent and member Zhang. I don't support the idea of proposing listing the particular sites and their impacts. We have periodically received information about the overall rate of infection in our school district, and that's appropriate. But I don't, for the reasons already stated by President Nguyen and Member Zhang, I don't think we should be doing a school by school report.
And again,
there is no consensus at this time, so
so can I just make one comment? I don't think that we're done discussing. Excuse me, pardon me.
There is no consensus.
So ma'am, I'm still making my case, okay?
We've already went through this.
So ma'am, I'm allowed to, per Robert's Rules of Order, I'm allowed a rebuttal, okay, per Robert's Rules of Order, so I'm providing a rebuttal. So my comment here is if we're concerned about, we have an oversight responsibility. We do not delegate everything. We have an oversight responsibility. There's a difference between delegation and oversight. If we're worried about sensitive information, can we put this report in closed session?
There's no consensus, so therefore we're moving on to item 16.1, Superintendent concluding comments, updates, and future agenda items.
Thank you, President Nguyen. So I did want to just point out that we do release the case rates every week. It's on our website. It's public, so anybody can see that. But we don't do it by school nor by classroom. Just wanted to end by, again, deeply appreciating our school site staff, the office staff, between contact tracing and receiving families in and students coming to the office, our teachers, and all they're doing right now in the classroom, all of our support staff, as well as all of our district office staff who have been going out to schools, subbing in classrooms, helping in any way they can. It's just tremendous, and this is the only way that we're going to get through this, is if we're all in this together. And so really, really deeply appreciate them. And I will say, I myself been out to classes and to schools, and when I interact with the young people, I was at BGP today as well as Kennedy, and just seeing the young people, seeing them there, seeing them learning, interacting with each other, it makes it all worthwhile. It's just tremendous to have our students being able to be in school in person. So thank you.
Thank you. With that, we move on to item 17, adjournment. May I get a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn the meeting.
I second. Motion made by Member Zhang, seconded by myself. How do you vote, Student Board Member?
Yes.
Member Zhang?
Yes.
Member Hill?
Yes.
Member Grandal?
Yes.
And myself is a yes, so 5 ayes. Thank you. Meeting adjourned at 8:05 p.m.